All right, hello and welcome. My name is Dave. I'm going to be going through the Ranger creation process for this tabletop adventure game called Rangers of Shadow Deep by Joseph A. McCullough. This is a solo slash cooperative tabletop skirmish game set in a medieval fantasy world in which the Shadow Deep, a encroaching blight of evil and gloominess, is spreading across the land, and an elite force of rangers is the only thing holding it at bay while the king sends for more aid from afar. In some ways, this game is a lot like a role playing game, at least as far as character creation, which you will see shortly. But in other ways, it is very similar to another tabletop skirmish game, war game, by the same author called Frostgrave, Fantasy War Games in the Frozen City. If you've played that game or know anything about it, you will probably see a lot of familiar mechanisms in this one as we build our ranger and his band of companions. This is the cover of the book. Really cool aesthetic and very cool illustrations. I love these monochrome charcoal style or pencil drawings. Great art style in this book. So what do we need to play this game? Like a lot of miniatures tabletop games, you need miniatures. You need some terrain with which to build the map on which you will push those figures around and do battle. A couple of 20-sided dice are some must-haves because this game uses a 20-sided resolution mechanism for its activations and combat. You also need a deck of cards, which is new, was not in Frostgrave. You use a deck of standard 52 card playing cards to create a event deck, and at the end of every round you draw a card and reference a table based on the card you draw, and that determines what happens at the end of a given round of play. Then you also need some things like treasure tokens and a tape measure, of course, because like all the best tabletop games, you do not use a grid. In Rangers of Shadow Deep, you use just a tape measure. And you also need the ranger sheet, which I have here. This keeps track of not only your main ranger, who is like your character in the scenarios you play, but also companions. You have room for several companions in your little war band. And building that list of companions is going to be part of our process here. So let's just jump into it. Creating a ranger. So the book tells us that in addition to the sheet, we also want to try and get a mental picture of your ranger. In my case, and this is where it's kind of like a role-playing game, you want to have an idea of the archetype or the sort of person you want to play as you face the challenges of the game. But it's not really role-playing game because you don't make choices. You don't get in the headspace of a character and make narrative open-ended choices like you would in a role-playing game. But this process does help you kind of focus down on what sort of abilities and gameplay style you want this ranger to have. So the first thing we want to do is create a solid mental picture of the ranger. And my mental picture of this ranger we're about to create, I really like the English yeoman archetype, a longbowman of like the 14th or 15th century in England, but with kind of a sneaky, stealthy bent to his approach to situations, as well as like a solid leader of men. So in that way, kind of an amalgamation of Robin Hood, Aragorn, and Richard Sharp from Sharp's Rifles. And to that end, speaking of Sharp's Rifles, because this is about a band of elite military rangers. There's going to be an aspect of like military fiction to these scenarios from which we can pull some inspiration. So Sharp's Rifles, the Black Company, probably the first of the Malazan books, Gardens of the Moon, if you've read that book. A squad of elite, highly trained, highly effective warriors. That's what we're going to be creating here with one main ranger at the head of that group. So that's what I'm thinking is a range attack based, kind of stealthy, kind of inspiring leader of men is who I'm thinking for this character. And then we also need to create a name for this character. And I'm not great with character names. I tend to just like look up lists of names and pick one out that's cool. But in this case, this Norse name, Ivar, is one that I picked because it means a man who shoots with a bow. Very simple. He doesn't need a last name or like a title for now. He's just Ivar. He's a ranger. Not that that needs clarifying, but we'll put it in there. He'll start at level 1 with no experience. All right, what do we need next? When we build this ranger, we're going to start tricking him out with some abilities, some spells, some cool skills, and some companions. To do this, we are awarded at the start of the process 10 build points, and these 10 build points will be spent on a variety of improvements to our character. But before we go into that, let's look at what we start with. We can see the next section here is stats, and our ranger starts with some base statistics. And they're shown here. Starting with movement, we get 6 inches of movement whenever we activate our ranger. Again, we use the tape measure when we move the figure on the map on the tabletop. And if you're used to playing board games or Dungeons and Dragons that use more of like a 1-inch grid system to measure movement, this is actually a more typical for tabletop skirmish or war games, in that we simply measure with a tape measure or ruler using standard inches, imperial system inches. So our ranger starts with 6 inches of movement. The next statistic is the fight stat. I mentioned earlier you use a 20-sided die when you resolve activations, or excuse me, when you resolve actions and when you resolve combats in the game. You roll a 20-sided die. Usually you'll add a modifier of some sort when you roll that die, and the resulting number you get after you roll the die and add the relevant statistic is the result of your action, and then you compare that result to either a target number or to an enemy's roll, an enemy figure's roll, and if you're performing combat, and the higher number wins, and then you resolve damage and that sort of thing. So fight, when we're in melee combat, when our figure is fighting another figure on the table and they're standing next to each other using hand-to-hand combat, they use their fight stats. So if you were going to sword fight another figure or attack a giant fly, you roll the 20-sided die, and then if these were the stats we ended up with, we would add 2 to the result of our roll, and that would help determine the outcome of the combat. Shoot is similar, but it applies to ranged combats, which will be relevant for this character because we are planning on making him a longbow focused sort of a sniper tracker stealth character. So this is definitely a statistic we will want to improve. Armor is a value that determines how much damage we can soak when we are attacked and lose that combat. We would determine how much damage we take and then we determine the damage value of the attack and then subtract our armor from that value. So if we are hit for 15 damage, our 12 armor will reduce that to 3 damage. Will is a bonus that we get when we resist effects of spells or other conditions that maybe require a mental resistance. So our will is it's exactly that. It's our strength of will. And then our health is the number of hit points, or HP, that we start a scenario with. If we're reduced to 0, typically that means we're dead or otherwise taken out of the scenario. Usually that means we lose. Current health, 18. We're obviously not in the middle of a scenario right now, so. But this is where we would keep track of and update our health value as we play through the scenario. And then recruitment points. Just like we start our ranger character with 10 build points, which we can use to improve our statistics, add abilities and spells, and skill bonuses. So we also start the creation process with recruitment points, which we can use to recruit companions into our ranger band. We will get more into that later. So we, as mentioned, have 10 build points with which we can start to trick out our character. And the book tells us you can spend up to 3 of your build points to increase your ranger's stats. For each build point you spend, you may increase any one stat except for armor by 1. I have that summarized down here. So up to 3 of our 10 build points can be used to increase base stats. I think this is a interesting place to start. Let's start by using one of those build points, and we'll keep track of how many we've spent down here. I'm willing to use all 3 of our allotted build points for this. Let's increase shoot to 3 by using 2 of them. This is going to be a ranged attack focused character, so any boon, any bonus I can achieve to that end is going to be worthwhile. We cannot increase armor. I'm thinking because he's a great leader of men, he has strong mental fortitude. Let's use our final of the 3 build points to increase our will to +5. And there, our base stats have been improved using our 3 allotted build points. Next, we move on to using up to 5 build points on selected heroic abilities and spells. And these are rather more exciting than simple stat line bonuses. Heroic abilities and spells they're exactly what they sound like. Heroic abilities are cool triggered abilities that you can choose to use or not use. They differ from spells in that they do not cost an action on a ranger or companion's turn to use. Typically when you activate a ranger or companion and it takes its turn in the game, it will get 2 actions to use on its turn. Spells take one of those actions to use, and typically you cannot use a spell, more than one spell I should say, on a given activation. Heroic abilities, however, do not have that restriction. You can use more than one on a turn, and they do not take an action to use. They are, however, pretty specific, pretty situational, so they can be amazing, but they have restrictions on when they can be used, as we will see. So here's a list of heroic abilities, and keeping in mind the archetype we've chosen for our character, a sort of stealth and ranged attack focused character, this first ability, Blend into the Shadows, immediately catches my eye. This ability may be used if an evil figure is about to make a move that would take it into combat with the ranger. Instead, determine the evil figure's action as though the ranger were not on the table. So this is an immediately useful skill for our stealthy ranger archetype. So we'll put that ability in here. This is an incredibly small text size. Thankfully, it expands to fill once I've finished putting it in. Let's put a short summary of what it does. This can help reduce reference to the book when we're playing the game. And we'll summarize it as: if evil creature about to enter combat. Ignore Ranger. That probably loses some of the nuance of the text of the rules, but it will be helpful as a reminder at least. So that's one. Let's see. So we used our 3 build points earlier for our stat increases. We've now used 4 by picking this heroic ability for our character. So 4 of our allotted 10 build points are spent. Let's look through some more of these. Deadly Shot. This definitely catches my eye. The ranger may use this ability if he has rolled a natural... No, pardon my selection skills or lack thereof. The ranger may use this ability if he has rolled a natural 18 or 19 during a shooting action. Treat this roll as a critical hit. Critical hits, as in many combat-focused role-playing games or war games, are basically extra damage when you resolve them. And in this game, I believe a critical hit is 5 extra damage. So typically you would achieve a critical hit if you rolled a 20 on a combat roll, and this basically increases the possibility of a critical hit happening to include an 18 or 19 natural roll. Natural meaning unmodified. What it says on the die has to be an 18, 19, or 20. Now, to count as a critical hit, I believe this ability sounds awesome. Deadly Shot, and we'll summarize that as critical hit on natural 18 through 20. Alright, so we've now used 5 of our 10 build points. 3 on our stat increases and 2 on heroic abilities. Deadly Strike, which is basically the same as Deadly Shot except for melee combat. It distinguishes between melee and ranged combat as a shooting action or a fight action. Distraction. Dive for cover, evade, focus, frenzied attack. These are all good, but not really meeting my mental picture of this ranger. Parry, kind of a cool sword fighting ability. Roll with the punch. Shove. Steady aim. Steady aim is definitely an ability that I think we can make use of. The hero may add +5 shoot for 1 shooting roll. This must be declared before the roll is made. Now, I'm not 100% clear on what it means by 1 shooting roll. Is that per scenario? Is that per round? Maybe something for us to clarify shortly. However, let's add the ability, as it definitely fits the type of character we're trying to build. So steady aim. Add +5 to shooting action. Or as it says, to 1 shooting roll. Alright, we've now used 6 of our 10 build points. 3 on stats and 3 on heroic abilities. Now we come to spells. Spells, besides taking an action to use during the game, despite the fact that you cannot take use a spell more than once, cast any I should say, you cannot cast more than 1 spell in a turn. They do, however, say you can spend your build points to take a given spell as many times as you want. So, considering the type of character we're trying to build here, are any of these spells valuable to us? Burning Light makes a +3 attack against all undead creatures within 8 inches and line of sight. I like the sound of smoke. It's kind of a Batman-style spell. The caster may place a thick cloud of smoke 3 inches in diameter anywhere within 3 inches. The smoke blocks all line of sight but does not inhibit movement. I don't know if it's worth taking that in addition to our ability to blend into the shadows. But where blend into the shadows only prevents the creature from entering combat. If it would enter combat with us, smoke can keep it from seeing us in the first place, which could help provide some positional control over the battlefield. So let's say we have smoke. We'll put in parentheses that it is a spell, and its ability: cast a 3-inch cloud of smoke anywhere within 3 inches. Blocks LOS or line of sight. There we go. So we've used 7 of our 10 build points on this ranger. Now we come to skills, and skills pertain to this side of our character sheet right here. And I've already put an asterisk in the skills that I think this character should have, based on the mental picture I have of him. Acrobatics, leadership, of course, navigation, like an Aragorn-type ranger would certainly be good at finding his way around the wild. Perception, ability to notice detail, perhaps infer meaning where others might not. Stealth, strength, survival, and tracking. I think all of these are useful for the character type that I'm trying to make. There are 8 of them, and the reason there are 8 of them is because you can, for 1 build point, add a +1 to 8 different skills. Meaning that if we were called upon to use that skill, if the game tells us you need a leadership roll that beats a target number of, let's say, 14, if I have a +1 in leadership, then I can add +1 when I make that roll. So the ranger will be good at specific things based on where these skill points are allotted. So, and again, because it's kind of confusing, we can use up to 5 build points to spend on skills, and for each build point we get, we can add +1 to 8 skills. We have used 7 of our build points already, meaning we only have 3 left. I'm comfortable using all 3 of these, and simply increasing these 8 skills 3 times, which would make each of them a +3. And I will set it up that way to begin with here. However, we may wish to adjust this once we've had a look at the kinds of companions we want to recruit. And I say that because the next thing we can use build points on is using them to increase our recruitment points. We start with 100. I want this ranger to have 4 companions. In a solitaire scenario, I could have up to 7 or 8 figures on the table. That's too many for me to want to bother. I would rather have fewer and better companions. And I have some miniatures that I'm thinking of using for them already in mind. So I want to see if this 100 recruitment points is enough for me to be able to afford the 4 other figures I want in my warband. But we may wish to reduce some of the build points that we're putting into these skills in order to make the ideal warband later. We'll have to see. So we've now, at this point, used all 10 of our build points. 3 on stats. We've used 4 on heroic abilities and spells. And we've used 3 on skills. So far, 0 on recruitment points. Alright, so that's where we are with our character right now. There's the book goes into a little more detail on what the skills are for. For the most part, they're self-explanatory, so I'm not going to really get into it. Then the game tells us about weapons, armor, and equipment. So we have 6 item slots, as shown on our ranger sheet. Here are those slots. And it says when creating a new ranger, the player may choose up to 5 items from the basic equipment list below. They have no cost. They're provided by the king's armories. If we later find, read, loot, better equipment, then we can discard some of the stuff you have to make room for the newer, better gear. Alright, so here's some awesome art of some of the available weapons. But here we go, basic equipment. We're definitely taking a bow. Our character would not be the same without the bow. We're going to call it a longbow. There's no mechanical difference between a bow and a longbow in this instance, but I like the flavor of it being a true yew longbow. Let's see, what else? You'll probably have a hand weapon, and this is just so that our character will not be useless if he gets into a hand-to-hand fight with an evil creature. Incidentally, the game is generic with its weapon descriptions because this is a bring-your-own-figures game. You provide miniatures you have from other games or other, miniatures hobby-focused products, and you can kind of build the character you want in this game to match the figure you already have. So that's why we don't have 30 different types of swords and rapiers and, claymores and things like that. You just have heavy weapon, bow, crossbow, light armor, heavy armor, quiver, rope, shield, staff, throwing knife, two-handed weapon. Generally, the game can accommodate any weapon the figure you're using to represent the character using these more generic categories, which I think is great. So we will have a hand weapon. Actually, let's go back. Because we have a bow, we must have a quiver. A figure must be equipped with a quiver to make normal shooting attacks with these weapons. A figure with a quiver may also carry 1 piece of magic ammunition without that ammunition taking up an item slot. We will see shortly whether I can begin a campaign with magic ammo, but for now, let's say we have a quiver. Then we have a hand weapon. And we will simply say this is a longsword, following the Robin Hood or Aragorn character archetype. That should account for most of our martial needs. So we still have 2 slots for basic items. Throwing knife and two-handed weapon are other choices. We should say we have light armor. Heavy armor receives +2 to armor, but -1 to its move. I would almost consider taking heavy armor, but considering we have smoke and considering we have the ability to blend into shadows, but I don't want to only have 5 inches of movement if I need to move quickly. So I'm thinking light armor, which provides no penalty to movement, but only adds a +1 to armor. So let's say we have light armor. And we will adjust our armor stat in the appropriate box. So now we subtract 13 from damage taken when we are attacked. Let's also put in some of the benefits that these weapons give. Longbow is 1 action, summarized 1 AC, to load and fire, unlike a crossbow, which needs a 2nd action to load because it is slower to use. A longbow also has 24 inches of range on the tabletop. So a full 2 feet, as long as we have line of sight to a target, we can take a shot. Quiver required for, we'll just say ranged weapons. The hand weapon does not get a special modifier. Basically, by having a hand weapon, we don't suffer a penalty when we're in close combat with an evil figure. Light armor provides +1 to armor stat. We have 1 more item we can pick from the basic equipment list. And let's choose a rope. I think a rope is useful to have. You can use an action to place rope with, which lets you climb vertical, lets you climb vertical faces in the game without suffering movement penalties. You can only place it, of course, when you're at the top of such a structure. But if you think you're going to be going up and down a tower, up and down a cliff, a rope can be useful to have. So rope, 1 action to place at top of sheer face. Then no, let's capitalize move penalty. All right. So with our items, with our heroic abilities and spells, with our stats, with our skill improvements, and with, let's see, we can clear out most of these notes. Everything except recruitment points, because we haven't decided whether we want to adjust that yet. Here's how we're looking so far. Now we want to look at recruiting companions. And the game decides at this point that it's going to tell us how to play, which is useful, I think, before you choose companions, because you want to know how they're going to benefit you when you actually play the game. I'm not going into the full rules of the game, but suffice to say, when you play a round of the game, the first phase of a round, you get to move your ranger, and then up to a couple of companions with that ranger. And then the evil creatures, the monsters or villains in the game, will activate and follow a simple AI. Are they in close contact with a good character already? If so, then they fight. If not, then they move into close combat and fight. If they don't have enough range, they just move as close as they can to someone they can see that they want to fight, that sort of thing. And then any companions you did not activate earlier with your ranger will get their turn to go. And then at the end of that, you flip over one of the cards from the event deck assembled for that scenario and resolve it based on its result in the event table. That's a round of the game. So our companions, depending on how many we have, will typically activate split across 2 different phases of a round. So here's some rules the game gives us for recruiting companions. I'm building this as though I'm going to be playing it by myself. So as a single player game, I'm allowed to recruit up to 7 companions. As I said, I'm only, I think, going to have 4. And each type of companion we recruit to our ranger band costs a certain number of recruitment points, and we start with 100. We've not increased our recruitment points at all by using build points. If we wish, we can use build points to increase, for every build point we spend, we can increase our recruitment point total by 10, and we're allowed up to 3. So if I wish, I could take away some build points I've used on another benefit for this ranger and instead put them into recruitment points and get up to 130 total recruitment points. Hopefully that makes sense. However, let's check out what else the game says we can do. Ranger also gets to add his leadership skill to his total recruitment points. That is a good point. We have a +3 in leadership, which means we actually have 103 recruitment points. This is not a huge number, but it might make the difference between a desired companion and being able to join the team or not. Alright. Companions are not fixed between missions. You may bring the same companions game after game, but that's not required. You may pick new companions for each mission. That is good to know, but I like the idea of this being a tight-knit group of soldiers who have shared many adventures and hopefully all make it through their campaign alive. It's not likely, but such is the drama of skirmish gaming. Alright, companions come with equipment listed in their description. They can also carry 2 additional items. They can only use the type of weapon with which they come equipped. They can replace mundane weapons with magic ones. They obviously have to find such things first, and it has to be a not good enough magic weapon for the main ranger to want to use it. The first time a companion is selected, the ranger player may also assign it +3 to any skill. This may be a skill the companion already possesses, in which case increases bonus by +3, or any other skill from the skill list. So here's some of the companions we can have. Now, as I mentioned, I've already got 4 figures in mind for these companions. One of them is a crossbow style ranged sharpshooter, kind of like the character we already built, except he has a crossbow rather than a regular bow or longbow. I also have a figure that's more of a speedy, sneaky rogue, who would be nice for darting in and out of places to capture treasure tokens and that sort of thing. I also have a couple that are just like two weapon brawlers, melee focused fighters. So we don't need to go through every type of companion on here, but I think our archer, our crossbowman, is definitely going to be a regular archer. He comes with a bow or a crossbow. We'll select crossbow, dagger, light armor, and quiver. I don't see a reason to give him more things than this to start, although a rope might be useful if he's perched somewhere high up and wants to get down quickly. So maybe we give him a rope. So let's go over to our ranger sheet, and on our next page, we can start putting in the details of our companions. So we have an archer, and he'll have a crossbow, light armor, a dagger, and a quiver. We're also giving him a rope. It's one of his 2 allowed items. And what's his name? Well, let's be unimaginative and just put something in for now. His name is Robin. What are his stats? He has 6 move, 2 fight, and 2 shoot, and 11 armor. He also has +1 will and 10 health, and he costs 20 recruitment points. Whoop, +61 will. And how much health did he have? 11? 10 health. So he cost us 20 of our 103 recruitment points. So we now have 83 left. Alright, the other character type we wanted to add was a speedy, sneaky, thieving rogue type. This is like our spy character. our spy companion. So let's scroll through the list here. Recruit rogue. Rogues aren't the best fighters, but they're highly skilled individuals who can be invaluable if you need a lock picked or a trap disarmed. Savage, swordsman, templar, tracker. We are going to choose rogue for this character. So with 7 move, they are definitely one of the faster characters in the warband. So with 7 move, +1 to fight and shoot, and 10 armor, we'll name this guy Pistol. He is a rogue. 7 inches of movement. +1 fight, +1 shoot. 10 armor, is that correct? 10 armor, +1 will, and 10 health. And a rogue costs us another 20 points. Right, what skills and items? Oh, we forgot to improve one of the skills of our archer. We'll go back to that in a moment. All right, so our rogue has dagger, throwing knife. Those are the only pieces of equipment he has. And what skills do we want him to have? Well, he already has climb +2, perception +2. Wait, can we just copy and paste this? That would be wonderful. Sort of. There we go. Alright, so these are our skills. And we can improve one of these by 3, or give him 3 in a skill he doesn't have. I love the idea of him being super good at climbing. Let's give him climb +5. Let's add 3 to his climb stat. Alright. Let's go back to our archer, Robin. There we go. So yeah, he doesn't start with skills. What are some skills he might find useful? If we look at the skill list on our main sheet: acrobatics, ancient lore, armory, climb. Climb might be good. If we gave him the rope, we're thinking he might be good on high ground, doing some sniping. Stealth, strength, survival, swim, track, traps. I think climb is what I want to give Robin as his +3. We're gonna be embracing verticality with this group. Alright, so that's our archer and our rogue sorted out. Who's our next companion going to be? I have a couple of brawlers, and these are going to be like 2-weapon fighters who are just good at duking it out in hand-to-hand combat. Barbarians might be cool. Oh, we have to update our allowed recruitment points. We've spent 40. So we have 63 of our 103 left. So Barbarian would be cool. It says they have a shield. The figures I want to use don't have shields, and they cost 35 points each. Maybe we'll keep looking, because I don't have 70 to spend right now. Conjurer, Guardsman. Guardsmen use 2-handed weapons. It's not really what I'm thinking. Hounds, and I don't want to recruit animals. Knights, again, 35 points, and also not really what I'm thinking. Man of Arms might be where it's at. Recruits. Recruits are pretty cheap, but swordsmen. With 63 points, if I do my brawlers as 2 swordsmen, I think that might be what we want. Or 2 trackers. Trackers are another ranged figure. Let's do swordsmen. Swordsmen are highly trained in the art of wielding a blade, and have learned to defend themselves without recourse to heavy armor or shields. That is consistent with the figures I have selected to represent these guys, so I like that. They do have swords. They have other weapons too. One of them has a flail in the other hand. One of them has, I think, a hand axe in the other hand. Alright, so swordsmen. We have 2 of these guys. And if we look at our, yeah, we have plenty of room to stat these out. So they cost 25 each, so we'll be using 50 more points, which means we'll have 13 left out of 103. Alright, so this will be a swordsman who costs 25 points. And we will be having another swordsman who also costs 25 points. The fillable sections in this sheet are not consistent. Oh well. What are the names of these characters going to be? Swordsman 1 we can call Diego. And the second one will be Anthony. Yes, I did just pull some inspiration out of my butt from the Mask of Zorro. Alright. What do swordsmen get? They have a hand weapon, a dagger, and light armor. So they both get hand weapon, dagger, light armor. Incidentally, daggers function just like hand weapons, except they have a -1 to their damage. So after you succeed with an attack and figure out how much damage it does, you subtract 1 from that total. Daggers are just not very good, but they can be decent as a backup. There are spells and things that can disarm characters, so if you lose your main hand weapon, it is nice to have a backup. Alright. The move stat for a swordsman is 6. They also have +4 to fight, which is awesome. +4 fight. They probably have nothing as a bonus to shoot. That is correct. 11 armor and +2 will. So +0 to shoot. 11 armor. Already forgetting what I looked at. 11 armor +2 will and 12 health. Yes. We can also increase their skills, and if I have 2 of these guys, then they should have complementary skills. What should they be? Just thinking about it while I fill in some of these other values here. What's our skill list look like? Acrobatics, ancient lore, armory, climb, leadership, navigation, perception, pick lock, read runes, stealth, strength, survival, swim, track, and traps. Let's have one of them be good at swimming and one of them be good at because these are skills, they should ideally, I guess, be skills that aren't represented elsewhere in the team. The rest of the team is very climb focused, if you're to total the bonuses across the other characters so far. Swim, traps, ancient lore, armory, climb. Climb is already represented elsewhere. So let's say traps and ancient lore. One of these guys is going to be a nerd, a history nerd. So Diego will be good at ancient lore. And Anthony will be good at figuring out how to spot and disarm traps. All right. So with 13 points left, I don't know if there's a way we can spend those. Let's check the rules. Nope, we just have 13 points left that we can't use, which is fine. I think I feel good about this being a well-rounded and thematic troop of elite rangers. So what I'm hoping to do now that this process is complete, now that we've shown how you make the ranger, how you allot the different skills and abilities and things, using your 10 build points, using your recruitment points to get companions. Now that I've walked you through those things, probably next I'll just show you some of the physical components at some point that I use to play the game, and then the figures that I want to paint up so we can actually play through a scenario or two. I'm not sure if I'll actually shoot gameplay of a scenario, maybe at some point if I figure out a good way to do it. But the next thing I'm going to want to show is some of the figures before they're painted, the other components, the dice, the tape measure, the cards, things like that that we use to play the game. And then I think some of the painting process. I've been wanting to show how I paint wargame figures for a little bit, and I think that could be a fun little demonstration. So thanks for watching this video in the meantime, and we will see you next time. Thanks.